Time to pull up a chair and let's talk some fantasy football. That beeping sound you heard this afternoon was the Lions backing up the truck for Penix Jr and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, Detroit made both players the highest paid at their positions. Doug, with these moves, do you think the Lions are now like the favorite in the NFC?
Favorite in their division, yeah, possible. But with Chicago and improving and whatnot, I think that's even a question. NFC, I still think we're looking at San Francisco, and I think the Eagles with the improvements that they've made, I think we're looking at a clear 1, 2, 3. Detroit's probably in my mind number 3 because let's be honest, these guys were already on the team, so now they're just happy instead of underpaid.
They're probably happy last year too. Sebastian, DraftKings has the Lions at plus 1,200 for the Super Bowl. They're tied with the Bills for the 4th best odds. Are you putting any money on them?
Yeah, no, I actually think I would probably not be putting money on either team at that price. I do think they're good teams. I just don't think that, I think 12-1 is a little bit short for a team that historically has not had the best success in the playoffs. I know they did fairly well last.
That was a gentle way of saying that.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, they expelled some demons last year with getting a win there at home against Stafford. But I just, they haven't done enough for me to really think they're ready to take that really next step. And like Doug just talked about, that division is only getting better. Packers looking pretty good with Jordan Love. We'll see what happens at quarterback with the Vikings, Minnesota. They've got a pretty good setup, assuming they get the quarterback right. And same thing with the Bears with them getting those wide receivers. So, right now, I think they are the favorite in the division, but I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger on Super Bowl yet.
Jameson?
I think they're worth the sprinkle. Especially with the division, they got 2 rookie quarterbacks. I know everybody's falling in love with Jordan Love, but the NFC overall is much easier to get through. I know Detroit had a lot of injury luck last year, and that seems, the year before Philly kind of had the perfect wave, and then last year kind of fell off. But as far as the NFC goes, especially Detroit is in this position in the draft. Outside of cornerback, they can kind of pick and choose their spots. The roster overall is actually pretty good, and they don't have to necessarily go for need. But I do think they deserve to be the favorite. They got a top offensive line. Defense is getting better. Jared Goff, I thought, took the next step this past year. I thought he did some really nice stuff. So I think it's worth a sprinkle there, especially in the NFC.
Well, gentlemen, after those sprinkles, let's get to it. Tonight on the Rider Dynasty podcast, Joe Harlow is on assignment, so we welcome 2 guests to the pod. First up is a content creator for IDP Plus, where he hosts multiple pods. He's a captain in the U.S. Army and a physical therapist for the troops. You can find him on Twitter at the DeJean Doc. It's Sebastian Fearon. How are you doing, Sebastian?
Yeah, gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing great.
There we go.
Apologize. Yeah, a little bit of that lag, but yeah, no, how we doing? Happy to be here. Thank you guys for bringing me on, and excited to talk NFL draft. Football is that much closer, so absolutely happy to be here. Appreciate it.
Oh, we love having you. We're super excited. And next up is a writer, the creator of the preseason matchup analysis, the big boards for FF Today. He's also the co-host of the soon-to-launch All Out Blitz podcast for IDP Plus. You can find him on Twitter. Oh, another boring name Twitter guy, at Doug Orth from at JJ Wenner. We're old enough to have our names. It's Doug Orth. How are you doing, buddy?
Well, hey, that's boring, but tell me more about this All Out Blitz podcast. This sounds awesome. Hey, I'm doing great, guys, and it's great to be part of this show with 2 of the coolest guys that I met at the Expo. So thanks for having me.
It is exciting to have you here, and I'm looking forward to a non-boring podcast with you next week. So, gentlemen, speaking of not being boring, if you want to get a jump on your competition for the upcoming drafts, our comprehensive 2024 IDP Plus Rookie Guide is here. Get the Rookie Draft Guide for a limited time only for $9.99, and you're going to receive updates every week. And the NFL Draft is here, so it's going to be updated again with all the landing spots and updated draft information. So check out the link in the show description and download your copy today. All right, gentlemen, as the draft draws near, there are a number of high-profile players that are being debated in most war rooms because of their injuries. With the incomparable Sebastian here tonight, what better way to start than to dive in on some of these players? I guess I'm just going to shoot these at you, Sebastian. I would like to start on the defensive side, get them out of the way. So
real football happens over there, so I'm
exactly. Good with it. So my number one edge is Laiatu Latu, but his back, man, is scaring a lot of people. What's going on there?
Yeah, no, actually, this is one of my favorite stories of the NFL draft. Laiatu Latu. This is a pretty incredible story. So I'm not sure if you guys are tracking, what exactly all is going on, because a lot of people seem to forget. But this is a guy who was forced to medically retire at the University of Washington, right? So he's a freshman at Washington going into his sophomore season. He picked up a neck injury, was serious enough where he was having some lingering effects that he actually had to have neck surgery. Spinal fusion, essentially what happens, they took two of that vertebrae and they put them together for stability reasons, right? So he was getting some neurological nerve stuff. It was unstable. The doctors said they kind of, forced him to medically retire. They essentially said, based on your injury, it's not smart for you to ever play the game of football again. So, at 19, 20 years old, it's pretty, I couldn't imagine being told that, right? This is what you've worked your entire life for. And he just, through perseverance and determination, he decided, you know what? No, I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep rehabbing. And 2+ years later, finally in the year of, before the 2022 season, he went and saw a specialist that's worked with a couple guys in the NFL like Peyton Manning and Danielle Hunter. He looked at his MRIs. He looked at his images. He said, hey, I've seen similar stuff. I think you can play. So he actually cleared him. It was, I can't remember the surgeon's name at the top of my head right now. I think it was Dr. Roberts, but they went back to the University of Washington and he said, hey, look, I got this clearance from this specialist. Can I play? They still told him no. And so that's actually what led to him transferring to UCLA. He wanted to play for the University of Washington. They just weren't willing to take the risk. Went over to UCLA. Obviously, those doctors kind of agreed with the specialist. And now we see 2 years of absolute dominance on the edge. So, I think it's a situation that could scare some people, but the fact that it was 2+ years ago and you just look at the production and how much of a polished pass rusher he is, this is actually someone's going to walk away with a really, really good player. Where, again, we just talked about guys like Peyton Manning and Danielle Hunter have had a similar injury, and they were able to have a pretty successful year, right? So your career, I should say. So I understand where the pause is, especially when you start talking about neck and medically retired and things like that. Because this is something when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, that's pretty scary. Like, what is this really getting into? But there's plenty of people that have played and are playing with spinal fusions, and just look at his last 2 years. So, it's actually someone who's a remarkable story of resilience and perseverance, and someone I'm pretty high on going into the draft season.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of Jalen Phillips with being medically retired, the UCLA connection. And, you do cheer for these guys, but I think Latu's ceiling is much higher than Phillips. So I'm looking forward to see his landing spot. Sticking with the DL.
JJ,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I wanted to jump in here real quick with now, Sebastian, in my research of Latu, he was playing rugby 2 months after his surgery. How can you expand on how incredible that is?
Yeah. So, it seems like a lot with the University of Washington situation is like risk versus reward, right? So, having a university, last thing you want to do is it puts a kid in a situation where he gets a tackle and, now he's paralyzed or anything like that, right? So I understand their safety on that side. Rugby, a little bit less regulated. They come from a different mentality, right? So once you have the surgery of it getting stabilized, structurally, you just have to wait for that incision and things to heal. It's going to be as structurally strong as it's not going to change in structure. It's really just the tissue healing and making sure you don't want to open up that wound. And you're going to have some precautions. I would say 2 months is a little bit on the early side. That's not something I'm going to recommend to my patients. But it's not something where, he really, it's this crazy long rehab, and it's something like an ACL where you have to learn how to walk again. Once they kind of go in there and make sure things are structurally sound enough, then it's kind of a little bit more at your own risk. So 2 months, maybe a little bit early, but really incredible story for him to just kind of yeah, he knows his body best, right? That's what I always kind of tell patients. At the end of the day, you really know your body best. So try to give the medical advice, not do anything crazy. But yeah, it's awesome for him to be out there doing what he's doing.
How hard is it doing PT for soldiers and telling them not to do anything crazy?
I think you said you work with, I don't know, is it high school kids that you work with?
Middle school.
Okay, well, yeah, pretty much. Depending on what unit you're with, right? But no, I love working with our heroes, our men and women, really defending our country. But it's challenging, It's a lot of these kids are coming from high school, right? I work typically in a training base, so we get a lot of kids right from high school and stuff. And sometimes it's just depending on where their situation is, they've just never heard some of these things, right? Some of this health literacy and just kind of educating, like. Some people, even from a diet standpoint, don't know you're not supposed to eat cheeseburgers every meal, right? So it's like you get a lot of variety, which I love. But the motivation is nice because they all have one goal to kind of defend the nation and be the best soldier they can. So that's the nice part. You never know what's walking through that door, right?
So Sebastian, I'm not a doctor, but you're saying when my kids are eating Takis and Monster Energy drink for breakfast, it's not good?
I'm gonna listen. I'm not a nutritionist, but I will just say, maybe read the back of that label, and it might tell you some things about some percentages might not be adding up there.
All right. Well, back to football. Johnny Newton, another guy with some injury concerns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, you're a big defensive tackle out of Illinois there. His was something that people weren't really kind of tracking during the year. They kind of kept it under wraps, right? So he played with it for most of the year. So it's a Jones fracture. So Jones fracture just means, there's actually, as small as your pinky toe is, your fifth metatarsal is, there's a decent amount of fracture spots on it. It's kind of funny, depending on where it's at, but it's closer to the base of the toe. In his case, what I was reading was it was an avulsion fracture. So an avulsion is when there's a muscle or a tendon attached and it kind of rips a piece of the bone off. So it's a little bit more forceful of what causes it, but clearly it's something that sometimes guys don't even notice, right? We're going to talk about another guy here in a little bit in Kool-Aid McKinstry who had a very similar thing. Newton kind of knew about it during the year, but he just kept playing on it because it's something you can play through. And then he got surgery in January, just kind of before the draft. So no pro day or anything from him, but looking at when he had the surgery in January, it's about a 4 to 5 month return to sport timeline. So when I give my timelines, there's a healing timeline, and then there's a when can the guy actually play football timeline. And I like to kind of go off of that. So it may be a little bit longer than some of the timelines when you look on Google and stuff, but I like to see like when's the dude going to actually be ready to play football. But based on, in January and the season starting in September, he should be good to go by training camp, right? So he's got about 8 to 9 months. So Jones fractures are one of those things where they typically have surgery because of the poor healing potential. There's not a lot of blood in that area, and that's really what drives your healing potential. But moving forward, it's pretty low re-injury risk. As long as things heal properly, he should be pretty good. And if things weren't healing properly, we would have probably heard, because they have those pre-draft medical checks that kind of run through some of that stuff.
Sticking then with, talking about, you said the avulsion fracture.
Yeah.
Isn't that what happened to Jimmy Fallon when his ring got caught and it just like peeled the skin and muscle back?
I don't know that injury specifically, but based on what you're saying, yeah, it's pretty much what happens is like, it can happen with hamstrings a lot, right? So if it's a forceful enough tear, it's essentially, that tendon connects your muscle to your bone. So if there's that much force, yeah, it'll just rip a piece of the bone out. Those are pretty gnarly, especially the hamstring ones. That really adds some time. Hamstrings they're a pesky thing. I'll keep it PG there, but they're a little bit annoying to rehab, right? So, but anyway, yeah, your avulsion is just that tear. So it sounds like it's really gross on your finger, but yeah.
So what's going on with Kool-Aid then?
Yeah, so similar fashion, he had a Jones fracture that he didn't even know about. The kid, sometimes these athletes are just incredible. It's like, I don't know how you're playing a full season at such a high level and just not knowing. Now, again, I don't know when exactly he picked it up, but essentially he was playing and he didn't know until he had his pre-draft or pre-combine medical check. They were doing the medical evaluation. They were like, hey, man, like you have a fracture in your foot. So, yeah, he has a Jones fracture, not an avulsion. So it's just the break. Again, he had surgery. It's common with the surgery. A lot of times with fractures, it's really just healing time time is the biggest thing with bone, but some areas are a little pesky where you might want to have surgery because of the lack of blood flow, right? You want to accelerate that healing potential a little bit more. So it sounds like that's what they did. Now he did just have a pre-draft medical check, and he was cleared, as in he's not ready right now, but things are healing the way you would expect them to. So typically with that one where it's not the avulsion, it's more of like a 3 to 4 month recovery time. He's got about 8 months until the start of the season. So again, a guy that right now he wouldn't be able to play, but by the time we play real football, he should be good to go. There really shouldn't be a lot of concerns as far as people drafting him. Now, again, how many coaches are hearing this brief from their medical personnel and actually listening to it? I don't know if it's going to affect his draft stock, because right now he couldn't do his pro day, he couldn't do the combine. So we'll see. But from a health standpoint for the season, he should be good to go.
I do have a quick question for you to follow up on that, Sebastian. So Johnny Newton is more obviously a defensive lineman. McKinstry is more as a cornerback. Can you talk briefly about how much different, being that they have similar injuries, how much different it is for McKinstry being a back pedal, mostly in a back pedal, versus Newton being more for moving? Does that play into the recovery timelines or anything like that at all?
Yeah. So, it might take a little bit more adjustment time. I would say, honestly, it's probably the more is going to be the weight difference of how much stretch you're putting through that bone. Right. So I don't have their exact weights in front of me. Right. But I'm assuming, Newton's probably a pretty big boy. Right. And Kool-Aid McKinstry looks
yeah, Newton's 300. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's probably going to be the thing of he has to be a little bit more careful right after surgery, as far as, we call it weight bearing tolerance, right? How much are you allowed to weight bear, right? So, but at this point, he's probably past that point where maybe he's in a boot, but he's probably fine. Again, I think we would have heard when it comes to the actual playing, because one of the guys who recently had this was Derrick Henry. So, it's a little bit less position dependent, I'd say, and more about them being careful how much stress they're putting through it. Because that's really, bone is the biggest thing. It's time. And then how you make your bone stronger is you apply stress to it. Right. So, and it's all about like integrated progression. So whether you're adding more of your weight that you can walk on it, or you're starting to do some squats with some more weight, right? You're loading your back and getting that stress through it. So I would say the biggest difference between the two positions is, you're going to want to be a little bit more careful with the bigger defensive lineman. But when you talk to actually getting to the point of them playing football, no, there's probably not a huge difference as far as, rehab from that standpoint.
So sticking with DBs, Cooper DeJean, or is it now DeJean? Somebody told me that it's DeJean.
I think it is DeJean.
Is it DeJean, like the mustard?
I mean,
I've only heard DeJean, but it should be DeJean.
Yeah, maybe, hopefully they ask him. Maybe they'll ask him on draft night how to say it. But
I didn't get the Beast. I know the Beast has a pronunciation guide. I might get it just for that.
Well, let me look. Actually, I have it up.
All right. While Doug's looking it up, Sebastian, what's going on with Cooper Mustard?
Yeah, no. This is another guy who, man, he what an electric player. I love watching him. At Iowa, if you like defense and punts, you might enjoy it. But if you're more of a normal individual, he was probably the most exciting element to them. Maybe him and Troy Taylor, their punter. But fibula fracture, right? So your two lower leg bones, you have your tibia and your fibula. Your fibula is the smaller one on the outside of your leg. And so what happened is there's a fibula fracture. There's just means that there's a break in that bone there. And so typically, like I was talking about, bones just need time to heal. And this one typically is about a 3 to 4 month recovery timeline. He's actually already kind of shown he's good to go through his pro day. I don't know if you saw the stats on his pro day, but he really showed out at his pro day. Like he kind of balled out. So if that doesn't give coaches confidence, I'm not sure what will, but I'd say at this point, he's probably, like he showed, already good to go. Right. So definitely a little bit. Fractures kind of sound scary. And they can be, right, depending on where they are. But if they're just like kind of a clean, simple break, it's really just, certain spots you got to go in and do surgery. But sometimes it's really just letting that heal. And it's just a time thing and just making sure, hey, in the first 2 weeks, don't go run and put a bunch of stress on this, right? So your fibula usually isn't a bad one, too, because it's only about like 15% of your weight bearing. So it's not like a huge, I don't want to say it's not an important bone because that's idiotic, but you know, it's not something you have to apply a lot of stress through every day. Right. So, you know, Cooper DeJean, yeah, some of these fractures is during the season, obviously it's a little different because it's something you can't rush. Right. If this happened, you know, months from now, yeah, you have to respect your healing timelines, because if not, you're risking another break and then you're out for the full season.
Yeah.
Right. But with the off season, these are actually ones where I'm a little less concerned than something like an ACL, a hamstring, you know, something more ligament or soft tissue, as we call them.
Well, last defensive player I have a question about, kind of considered the LB1 or at least top 3 LBs, Payton Wilson.
Yeah. No, another guy who I really like his game. So yeah, when I'm looking into him, you know, it's someone that I thought was like anecdotally in my head thought was more injured than he actually was, at least big injury wise. Right. So what I'm tracking here is he had 2 ACL tears and a season-ending shoulder. The hardest thing from joining the military is differentiating the word shoulder and soldier in my head. I literally, like, once a day I will mess up one of them. But anyway, yeah. So you know, the 2 ACLs is a bit concerning, right? Because I believe they were the same leg. So the biggest thing with ACL is when you ever have something major like that, you only have so much cartilage and kind of what we call like lubricant, you know, synovial fluid in the knee. And when you start doing a lot of procedures, you know, it can get you to a point almost like a Todd Gurley example when the knee is like, there's a little bit of a concern there. But, you know, from the standpoint of for the last 2 years, he's been pretty healthy as far as being able to be productive. I think that's encouraging. There wasn't a lot on the shoulder injury as far as what it exactly was. You know, was it a clavicle fracture? Was it something like an AC sprain like Anthony Richardson that was bad enough you would need surgery? Or was it like a rotator cuff tear? I couldn't find, you know, college is a little bit harder to find some of exactly what it is because it's really up to the player and the coach if they want to disclose it. But the ACLs are a little concerning just because 2 ACL repairs before you even get to the league is kind of like, I don't know, man. That's a little tough. So I might have a little bit of like a yellow flag, like a little bit of caution there. But I do see how he's been able to produce the last 2 years. So, you know, I wouldn't be someone that I'm like avoiding completely. If he makes sense for your team, I think he can be a good player. There's a little bit of concern anytime you have 2 ACL tears in the same leg, but it's not an automatic death sentence. It just increases your percentages of having some issues down the line. Whether that happens or not, who knows? I hope not for his sake, but it's just a little bit of pause because of the ACL tears. But other than that, again, I couldn't find exactly what the shoulder injury was, but most of those are pretty okay unless it's like a major surgery.
All right, well, let's move to the other side of the ball then. One of my favorite wide receivers this year is Lad McConkey, but he's missed a lot of time with injuries. What are your thoughts on Lad?
Yeah, no, Lad is somebody that, you know, well, so I'm a Florida Gators fan, so it's definitely, you know, it's like we're gonna be talking about a couple of Georgia Bulldogs. So I'm gonna try to put my bias aside here, but yeah, he is a guy who can definitely produce when he's on the field, but the back injury is really what got to him for the majority of the season. So low back pain, you know, I mean, honestly, I know that I've dealt with it most. It's the most like it's the biggest disability musculoskeletal wise that across the country, right? So, you know, a lot of people can kind of resonate with low back pain. Now, what I try to look for as far as long-term things is what was the real root of the injury. And from everything I read, I didn't see any surgeries and I didn't see any like breaks or anything. So it looks like it's just what we call a lumbar sprain, which is essentially like, you know, you got a lot in your low back, but typically it sounds like his low back musculature spasm. There was an initial injury. And what just kept happening is that he just kept trying to come back and then it just kept re-injuring, which is very, very common. Low back pain has one of the highest re-injury rates, like out of all the injuries, right? So it's a very common thing. And it's tough when you're dealing with these professional and collegiate athletes that play at such a high level. They're used to their body producing at such a high level. When you have something like low back pain or hamstring strains where you could feel better especially low back, because sometimes you wake up like, some days you wake up, you can feel great. Some days you wake up, you feel like, oh my God, I can't move, right? So it probably what kept happening, again, I'm making an educated guess, is that he started to feel better. He wanted to get back to playing, and then he actually got into a game environment when you have, a little bit of an environment you can't control. Practice, you can kind of control what happens. When you get to game film, someone's trying to take your head off. So it got to those points where he kept tweaking his back, and it really cost him more than if he would have just been able to take some time at the beginning of the season. But how do you tell a 20-year-old kid who's been working their whole life? They've been working their ass off all off season. They get to the season, and then, right before the season, they have this back injury. And to them, nothing's broken. I don't need surgery, so I should be able to go play. And he just kind of kept getting to that loop where he would be a little bit healthy, he'd go play, he'd re-injure it. So that's kind of, as far as in the season, very frustrating. Moving forward, I'm not super concerned with a young kid who had a lumbar sprain who's going to have plenty of time to relax. And then I saw he had a little bit of an ankle sprain that had him miss the last 2 games, but it was a lateral ankle sprain. Those are pretty normal. That's your typical basketball court, roll your ankle type deal, out a couple weeks, but it wasn't a high ankle sprain from what I could tell. So those are the ones that I take a little bit more of a pause at. But McConkey for the future should be pretty good. A little bit concerning that he hasn't been able to stay on the field throughout his career as far as from that standpoint. But, that's a little bit more of a guessing game than him having something that's going to be concerning moving forward. So his injuries this season, I'm not super worried about. You could make the argument that he hasn't been able to stay on the field throughout his career in college, which is a little concerning. But the injuries itself don't concern me a lot.
All right. Well, let's go to the QB room then. Michael Penix.
Yeah. Big Penix energy, man. I like this kid a lot. I think he's probably less of a kid than most of these prospects, but he just had like a really unfortunate 4-year stretch. So 2018 he tore his right ACL. In 2019 he dislocated his right shoulder, his non-throwing shoulder. In 2020 he tore the same right ACL again. And then 2021, he had a separated AC joint in his left throwing shoulder. So separated AC is kind of, think the Anthony Richardson. You have your acromioclavicular joint connects essentially your clavicle to your shoulder. If it's bad enough, there's different grades. Some require surgery. Basically anything above grade 3 is kind of like 50-50. And then anything above that, you kind of want to do it. Grade 3 can be a little cosmetic. That's what Anthony Richardson had, but as a quarterback, you probably want to get that done. But someone like Keenan Allen, I don't know if you guys have seen that picture where it's like he's got things sticking out, right? His collarbone. That's what it is. It's just he doesn't need it to perform because it just kind of calloused and formed itself. But if he wanted to make it look pretty, he would go get surgery. So that's one of those things. But the biggest thing is, looking at that stretch, that's horrendous. I can't think of anyone who's had a worse 4-year stretch as far as an athlete. That sucks. But now I look at it, since he's been in Washington, he's not missed a game in 2 seasons. So it's I think that really I'm not super concerned. It's a little bit of the Payton Wilson aspect of, all right, he's got 2 ACL tears in his one leg. But when you look at Michael Penix as a prospect, he has the ability to use his legs, but that's not really his MO. A little bit in the national championship game, he had to pull it out versus Michigan, but he's most dangerous in the pocket. And as far as him being a pocket passer, I think that he has great potential to be a really good quarterback. And I think the injury things are getting blown up a little bit out of proportion. Yes, I understand that's a terrible 4-year stretch of season-ending injuries, but he's played 2 years now with not missing really. I don't even know if he's missed a snap. And he's shown that he can produce. So this is someone, again, who you hear it right off the top before you really look into it. And you're like, I don't know, man. That's a lot of injuries. But it really hasn't been since 2021 since he's had really a big injury like that. So I'm a little bit higher on Michael Penix than probably a decent amount of people. But just looking at things, I think that he's shown that he can stay healthy these past 2 years.
I'll just add there that I know sacks aren't exactly the way to measure whether or not the guy's out, reacting under pressure or whatnot. Penix got sacked 16 times in 2 years at Washington. So he's not getting touched. He's not getting touched that much.
That's incredible.
So that just shows he has very good in pocket movement. Is that what you're saying, Doug?
Yeah, in pocket, and he's making quick decisions. And it helps when you have 3 stud receivers, but still, I mean, even you can give some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL 3 stud receivers, and you're still getting sacked 20 plus times a year. And it was 11 times this last year and 5 times the year before. So that's
wow.
basic.
As a Giants fan, that's like 2 weeks for us. So that blows my mind to hear those numbers, but that's incredible. Wow. I didn't know that.
I'm with you as a Jets fan, so
Yeah.
I understand those sack issues. Well, let's stick with quarterbacks then. Jordan Travis. I think we would be talking a lot more about Jordan Travis. I saw Lawrence Jackson had posted some things today on Twitter or yesterday, just about, are we undervaluing him because he's hurt?
Yeah, I would make the argument. This is another guy, Florida State, not my biggest friend, but I'll bite my tongue and be nice and just be unbiased and evaluate the prospect. But yeah, no, actually, I think someone could actually get a steal here, right? So we're talking about Jordan Travis. The injury itself looked brutal, right? His whole, I forget what foot it was, but it was facing out the complete opposite direction, right? So looking at it, like the picture, like, damn, like this guy, he really messed himself up. But it was an ankle dislocation and fracture. So essentially the ankle popped out of place, as you can obviously tell, and broke, right? But it surprisingly, because he got a lot of nerves and arteries and things like that running through those spaces, surprisingly, it seems like structurally he was kind of okay, right? Obviously, you broke your bone. You can't play for the rest of the year. But when we're talking about some of these brutal injuries like an Alex Smith, like if you have some of these complications, you talk about career threatening. And this is not the case, thankfully. So really, the recovery timeline based off everything I read is close to like 4 to 6 months. And he injured himself November 28th. So, 285 days. I think that's right around 9 or 10 months he has until the season. So he should be pretty close to being good to go. Right now, obviously, your rookie quarterback, he's going to probably not go into a situation where he's going to start right away. Anyway, I would imagine so. I think, he's getting graded as a day 2 or 3 prospect. So I'm assuming whoever drafts him is going to be somewhat a developmental role. So for as far as next season, I think, he should be good to go, especially with the fact that he's not going to be expected to be thrown into the fire right away. Right. So I think this is somebody who, he's clearly a very mobile guy. He brought that team to new heights as far as, it's been a while since they've been relevant, and unfortunately they're kind of relevant again. But he did a lot for that team, and he's a really damn good player. So like you kind of talked about, I really think he really is getting undervalued just because how bad that injury looked. But when you look at it, like, he should be ready by the start of the season. So,
Doug, what are your thoughts on Jordan Travis in this quarterback landscape?
Yeah, actually, he is somebody I'm going to probably write up tonight or tomorrow afternoon. I did watch him a little bit in watching Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, and I can definitely side on the mobility part. I'll just say when he was thrown to Keon Coleman, he was not great. but I'm going to reserve judgment until I actually am watching him. But from everything I can tell right now, we have our 6 quarterbacks. We have Spencer Rattler, who I think is going to be underappreciated, and then I think Jordan Travis is I won't say clear number 8, but I think he's probably an early day 3 guy.
All right. Sebastian, let's move to the running back position. Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah. I think this is the one prospect where I don't know if I'm just looking at this wrong, or like I just don't align with what everyone else is saying. Now, let me say this. Jordan Brooks, when he played, was an absolute awesome talent. He was fun to watch. He looked like the best running back in this class. However, so he tore his ACL against TCU on 11/11, so November 11th. So that gives him 10 months until week 1, right? Until assuming they play on wherever he goes, he plays on the Sunday and not the Thursday, but around 10 months, right? So typically with an ACL tear, you're looking at, and again, this is when I think they can be ready to go on the field. It's about 10 to 12 months. Most guys, it's 11 and a half months when they really get back to playing, right? running backs and wide receivers see the biggest dip in performance that first year after an ACL tear. Now, of course, we think about the Adrian Peterson unicorn example where he came back in like 8 months or something crazy like that and had a great year. We can even think about Breece Hall had a pretty damn good year. If he had about any offensive line or any help really on that offense, he probably would have been like, the top 3 running back in fantasy. But that is outliers, right? That's not something you should expect typically. Now, with kind of the advances in surgery and technology and rehab, like, yes, it's not as much of a death sentence as it used to be maybe 10, 20 years ago, but it's still a situation where I do not expect Jonathan Brooks to be ready and like fully at the level of where he can perform every snap until at least midway through the season. Now, these injuries, based on the research, not only are they physical, it's a psychological thing. Again, you have to learn how to rewalk. You have to learn how to trust yourself, right? That first time there's been a lot of players that say it's the first time you play pads. Like, usually these athletes grow up and they don't have to think. That's what makes them so good, right? But now every time you're making that same cut or every time you're about to take contact, you are now thinking about, hey, damn, like last time I did this, I tore my ACL, right? It's kind of in the back of your head. And they say it can take up to 2 years for normal movement to return. So a lot of times what happens with the body is our body's pretty smart. So it kind of finds the path of least resistance, right, of how to move. But a lot of times that's not the most optimal movement pattern. So it gets us into these what we call faulty movement patterns where they're not very efficient. And especially when you're cutting and trying to move at such high speeds and you're trying to go against other professional athletes, it's not going to bode well for you, right? So you may see guys look like they're stuck in the mud a little bit or that they're hesitating a lot when they come back. And it's all very normal and natural. And that's kind of what I'm expecting here, especially as a rookie running back. And the dude, I mean, I understand you can make the argument on both sides of the coin here. I know when I talked about it with one of my buddies, he looked at it a little differently. But for me, he's only really got 10 games of significant time. He sat behind DeJean and Roschon Johnson. He didn't really eclipse more than, I think, 200 or 300 yards a season his first 2 years. And then this year when he was the guy for 10 games and he tore his ACL, right? He showed some great things, but like I got a lot more questions with Jonathan Brooks, especially if talking about this season, than I do answers. So I understand that, DraftKings has him as the first running back drafted and he's the favorite and stuff. And as a Giants fan, I hope Dallas picks him and makes the mistake there and has to deal with that. But I don't know, man. I think he could be a great player, but just as far as this next season, I am not very high on Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, even Breece Hall, like you were saying, started off last year so slowly. And as a Jets fan, we were fine with it. Like,
yeah,
you take your time. I mean, after the first 4 plays of the season, we knew what was going to happen. So, take your time, Breece. But yeah, that's my concern with Brooks.
Yeah, I think Breece Hall is like almost best case, right? I like Adrian Peterson is literally like a unicorn. Like I don't know if anyone's going to be able to recreate what happened with that situation with I think it was like 8 months and he just like, man, that was crazy. But yeah, Breece Hall, I think he's literally best case scenario, right? And I'm pretty sure, I'd have to look back, but I'm pretty sure Breece Hall had closer to 11 or 12 months from his injury than Jonathan Brooks, who only has 10. Right, you definitely 9 months. There's significant re-injury risks. You don't want to come back before 9, based on the research. But really, most guys, it's more that 11 and a half mark where they're coming back, and especially your running backs. So
yes, Sebastian, 2 things. I think Breece Hall injured his ACL in like week 6 or week 7 of the 2022 season. So that would probably be early to mid October.
Yeah, so we're probably 10 and a half, maybe.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's
okay.
And the second, I thought we were going to be running on parallel lines here with Brooks, but I'm with you. I won't say I'm riding off this year in terms of his production. I don't expect to see what I saw on tape with him. I don't expect to see that again until 2025, and I don't think that's conservative. I think that's just conservative. I think that's a smart way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, if you see him drafted by, that whole SIGA, right? Your notebook. Make sure you know who drafts him in your dynasty leagues. And when they start getting tired of him come October, November, because of the investment they made and the fact that he's not producing yet, that's your opportunity.
Yeah, that's
right.
Great point. That's a really great point.
Yeah, definitely in dynasty. Yeah, redraft's another animal entirely, but dynasty.
Yeah.
what I saw right now, he's my RB1 in this class, and I'm taking away the fact that, I included the injury into my grade, but the point being is I was most impressed by him, all around.
Absolutely.
Of all running backs I've seen so far.
I was going to say, just real quick, with these rookie running backs, a lot of them start off slow, just adjusting to NFL speed. Guys like Jonathan Taylor, Melvin Gordon, it took like 6 to 8 weeks. They'd almost have like a stutter step right before they hit the hole and go. So you get Jonathan Brooks, who's coming off an ACL. Who you talked about, it's going to be playing kind of in the mud. I don't want to say it's necessarily a recipe for disaster. Not trying to cancel him out, but it's just the odds are stacked against him, especially his rookie season. Just kind of going into all that. And I think the dynasty takes a really good one because everybody's going to be high on him. The minute, let's say he gets drafted to Dallas, he ends up RB1 and, to the moon and all the memes and all the gifts and all that stuff. And just be patient, take your time. You can kind of pick some stuff off and it'll work out for him. He's a really good running back, but just got to get over the injury first.
Yeah, no, I think that was the most analysts I've heard. It's probably like overall what we all just talked about, like, that's probably the best way to do it, right? Looking at that aspect of, hey, don't give up on it. Kind of expect this, right? Because you're right. If they're going to go in and I spent all this, investment in this and I want them to produce right now. And it's just like, you got to give the kid a shot, man.
Yeah, we always talk about pain points, right? Every week you're not starting somebody you drafted. It's a pain point for that manager, right? It's like, man, I can't start him again. Those add up. So might as well talk about the unicorn of this draft, right? The generational tight end, Brock Bowers. What's going on with Brock?
Yeah, he is a unicorn. He's someone I am very glad is no longer in Athens, Georgia. That man is, he is a stud. So, he had a high ankle sprain. So high ankle sprain is, so you have your two lower leg bones, you got your tibia and your fibula, and think of it more, it's not really your traditional ankle, right? We think of our ankle down below. And again, it's that you typically think when you think ankle sprain, I roll my ankle playing basketball, and that's kind of what's on the outside of the foot. So your high ankle is really above the ankle. It's these ligaments that connect those two lower leg bones. We call it a syndesmosis, but for the sake of this, it's just ligament connective tissue, right? And so it's an injury that requires more force to happen. So they're less likely, right? Because it takes a lot of force. But the caveat off that is it also takes more time to recover because it takes more force. It causes more damage, right? So that's essentially what happened. He had what we call a tightrope procedure, right? So again, I'm not a surgeon, so I deal with these a lot, but I'm just going to throw that out there. So, I know enough about these procedures to talk about them, but I'm not going to get into the weeds of all that stuff. But essentially what happens is they go in there and it's a procedure that helps to stabilize the ligaments, but also allow it to be mobile. So basically it speeds up their recovery timeline. Sometimes, when you have these bad injuries and you don't have this tightrope surgery, you're looking at closer to 6 to 8 weeks where you're going to be back on the field, where these kind of speed it up to more of a 4 to 6 week timeline. And we saw that. I think he actually missed 3 weeks and only 2 games because they had a bye week in there. So he worked his tail off to get back there and do what he could. And obviously, we all saw he wasn't the same player as he was before the injury. He probably came back a little too soon, but I get it. Again, you're talking about a young kid who they're trying to win. Thank the Lord they did not, but they were trying to win 3 in a row. So like I get what they were doing, but yeah. So anyway, moving forward, should be good to go. No real concerns there. He did pick up a mild hamstring strain. And that's why he did not run at the draft. I can't remember if he picked it up at the draft or right before the draft, but that's why he didn't run at the combine. At the combine at his pro day because he was dealing with a little mild hamstring. Again, I'm not super surprised. Guys try to run really hard and hamstring strains happen at the combine. So as far as moving forward, I really don't have any injury concerns. I think, like you were saying, I think if he goes to the Jets, where I think he's going to go, that offense on paper looks incredible. I just don't know if the Jets week 1 are going to look like the Jets week 6 from a health standpoint, but we'll see.
Yeah.
No, we won't. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert for everybody. We won't look the same. Gentlemen, any other injury questions for Sebastian?
I think we covered just about all of them. So it's a lot of insight there. That was awesome.
A lot of insight. And we appreciate that because drafting can be tenuous, but one thing that shouldn't be tenuous is booking your vacation. And we are thrilled to announce our new partnership with your one-stop shop for the best prices in the travel world, Expedia. Check out the link in the show description and head over to Expedia.com. Their spring sale can net you up to 25% off select hotels. And of course, they always find the best deals for you, so you can just enjoy the ride or dynasty. Check out the link in the show description and get your next adventure planned today. Now, those of you who know me know that I have some control issues. I seldom like to cede power to anybody, but when it comes to betting, I always allow Jameson to take the lead. So Jameson, let's talk about some draft prop bets.
Yeah, so I pulled up some today, just for, I guess, notice to anybody. I usually do this starting the combine. If anybody wants to be serious about betting this, it's all information. Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, Todd McShay. It's really about the good sources, because if you get on Twitter, everybody's throwing stuff at the wall, and you can get lost in the weeds really quick there. So just keeping that in mind, it's like I said, it's really just an information game. There's a lot's going to change in the next 24 hours. We saw, a couple of years ago, the San Francisco 49ers were going to draft Mac Jones until an hour before, when Trey Lance or Sam Darnold was the lock of the century, until Baker Mayfield an hour before. So a lot can change. I picked some up. I'm going to ask you guys your opinion, but I'm just going to start with the quarterbacks. And this all just came from DraftKings to make it easy. And just to start off, J.J. McCarthy is still plus money to go to the Vikings at plus 130. I think that's the best fit. Kevin O'Connell at the Combine seemed pretty much gushing about him. It seems like the best fit for him, and I still like that at plus money. And then going to the Bo Nix and Michael Penix both be drafted over 32.5, so outside of the first round. And my reasoning for that is just because I know NFL needs quarterbacks, but we saw last year with Will Levis, he was number 2 overall until he fell out of the first round. I think both of these guys, especially Michael Penix, the history with the injuries, I know you said he was okay, but along with that, he's not very mobile. And I think he's kind of have to have a perfect system for him to really thrive, kind of like a Jared Goff or a Tua, where he got the offensive line, you got the weapon. He's not going to create. I should just kind of say that way. Yeah. And then Bo Nix, I think he's got a really good floor, but asking for, the ceiling, I don't think he's going to turn into Josh Allen or anything like that. And they're both older prospects. So I picked both of them to go out of the first round. I've seen some stuff with Denver with Bo Nix at 12. I don't believe that, and I'll get into that in a second here. And then Michael Penix to the Raiders at 13. I think just that's a little too early for those guys. And then the only other one I had as far as those two would be Bo Nix being drafted before Michael Penix. If somebody wanted to do a safer, that was plus 230. So I'll start with Doug. Just how you feel about these quarterbacks outside of the top 4 consensus, and where do you see them kind of falling in the draft?
I'll take my shorter opinions of them first here. I'm probably with you. I think the Vikings is probably the most likely landing spot for J.J. McCarthy. I think the question is whether they try 4 or 5. I don't think there's any way he's going to tackle 11.
Yep.
But I do think that's the most likely landing spot. I personally would prefer Jaden Daniels to go to Minnesota or Drake May, but I don't think.
I think it's too hard to do.
I don't think the Commanders and Patriots are trading now. And while I'm speaking of that, I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. should go to the Patriots, but okay, that's another story for another time. The Patriots are too far away to be thinking of their next quarterback right now. So that's where I'm going with that. Penix has one of those weird. You talk about that the soonest the guy could go and the latest the guy could go. And to me, Penix, the earliest. I think if you're betting Penix, you're sweating pick number 13, which is the Raiders, and then the next time you're sweating is 32, because teams will sometimes trade into the first round and get that 5th-year team option. I don't think he's going between 14 and 31. Bo Nix, I'm a little bit that his sweet spot's probably Denver, and I don't know if he's going to be. I don't know if the same fall is going to be in his future. I've read something about maybe the Rams were thinking of the future after Matthew Stafford, for example. I think Nix goes in the first round. But if it's not the Denver, I think it's in the 20s. So, but I would bet those, just the numbers that we're looking at, plus 230 and minus 300 for Nix Penix. I might bet both ends of that if I could. You know.
Yeah. I was going to say real quick, just with Denver, I think Denver's got probably the worst roster in the entire NFL, and they don't have a second round pick. So I think if the smart thing for them to do would just be try to trade down, maybe get a second. And, they talk about them trading up. They're still going to deal with this Russell Wilson disaster for a while, and this is part of it. And, drafting a guy at quarterback and drafting the guy at quarterback, I know they have a need. They just signed the MILF hunter, Zach Wilson, so that fixes everything.
They don't need anything.
Yeah, they got Jared Stidham, and then they've linked Penix to the Raiders, and I'm not trying to poo-poo all over this. I just think that they don't have a really good offensive line. Like I said earlier, he doesn't create. It doesn't set up. Luke Getsy didn't really help Justin Fields. I don't think he's going to get creative enough to get Michael Penix into the get him cooking the deep ball that he does really well when the pocket's clean, and then the short rhythm stuff. So it's those two teams, Denver and Las Vegas, and then you drop down the second round. I just don't see any other team. I know you said the Rams, but I think they're in a win now mode. I see them probably. I've got a bet for them later on. I just think they'd go offense there instead of drafting the future in the first round. But I definitely see your point there.
Yeah, I was floating that out as a possibility or something I've read, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't see the Rams going. Rams are thinking.
Sebastian, you got any hot takes on that?
Yeah,
I know you like Penix.
Yeah, no. I think that's the thing with the draft, right? So, actually, I did a betting episode on the IDP here about the draft, and one of the things is you kind of hit on it. It's like you are literally betting on the mind of like a bunch of old rich dudes, right? Like it's kind of like, so for me, like I will and I will be placing bets, and I have bets on the NFL draft, and it's great, but it's like, for me, like I definitely don't put a normal unit size on these as what if it was like a game on Sunday, right? Because it's like you're betting on information, and so you brought up some good points there. But I do think I don't think JJ McCarthy is worth a top 5 pick. However, I do think the Minnesota Vikings do think that. So I think that to get it at plus money with as much as is being talked about, and that is a really good situation for a rookie quarterback. You got 2 really good wide receivers. You got a fairly decent offensive line. You got a good tight end, even though he's coming off injury. But that's a good situation. So I do like that bet there at the plus 130. I was looking at over on DraftKings. They have pick 5, which is plus 250. But then you run the risk of if they trade with the Cardinals instead of the Chargers, as far as what's going to be there. So I like the safe kind of still plus money at 130. And then Penix, I think you kind of hit it right. As much as I like him, he's not sexy, right? A lot of these quarterbacks, he's not young. He's not mobile. He doesn't have these crazy wow throws. He's not going to be Zach Wilson, throw 60 yards across his body and equate to nothing. But, I mean, so I definitely see him falling out of the first round. And because he just doesn't have that, pop power. And then that injury concern, right? On paper, 4 season-ending injuries is not a good look. So I think you kind of nailed that there. And Bo Nix, man, I don't know what Denver's going to do. So that's the only one that I'm like, like Sean Payton, his quarterback room, Ben DiNucci, Jarrett Stidham, Zach, what are you doing? What? I don't understand. And it's just like Bo Nix fits, I guess, that profile of man, you're really reaching for this guy. But so that's the only one I'd be a little concerned about. I really like the other 2.
Yeah. The only other, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the only long shot I would have else for JJ McCarthy is 8 at Atlanta. I think they could trade back and still get one of the defensive guys that they would want there. So, but go ahead with your Doug, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Okay, so I know we didn't talk about these. I did 20 draft profiles, and I'm writing up a few more that they probably won't hit the site. I'll be incorporating those on my day after draft coverage. But I wanted to throw this out at you since we're talking about Bo Nix. Okay, 131. Here we go. Only one FBS quarterback attempted more passes behind the line of scrimmage in 2023. That was 131 attempts behind the line of scrimmage. That was Bo Nix. Then he had 181 more short passes. That's 0 to 9 yards. So 312 of his 470 pass attempts last year were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. And why I wanted to mention that is because people were talking about all that. Sean Payton, for example, he's going to want a quick processor that he wants. Well, that's great, but when a third of your passes are behind the line of scrimmage, that's not. There's a difference between getting rid of the ball quickly and then having the play design be that option. Yeah. So anyway, that's 312 out of 470 was just mind-blowing.
It's a good nugget.
I think he's a floor player, not a ceiling. And then when you're going the first round, you want safe, you want upside. And that's why I'm just betting those outside of there. So just some quick hits real quick, some positional teams you can catch on DraftKings. It's just the team to pick with their first pick. So Eagles to draft a cornerback, minus 160. I know you're laying a little bit of the lumber, but I think they might even trade up and get a cornerback. They got burned really bad last year. It's a premium position for Howie Roseman. I think that's something that he'll attack. And then two other teams to go cornerback, the Indianapolis Colts. We talked last week on the Rider Dynasty podcast about Quinyon Mitchell. I think he's a perfect fit, and I think if he falls to the Colts, that'd be there at plus 110. And then the Lions. Brad Holmes has talked a lot about getting a corner. I wouldn't be surprised if Kool-Aid McKinstry ends up there. That's plus 135. And then just going right back to the well on Denver and Las Vegas, the Broncos to draft a D-line or an edge rusher, plus 190. And then the Raiders to draft an offensive lineman first, plus 175. So kind of going against the notion of them drafting quarterbacks first and actually drafting for need. The Raiders need cornerbacks. They need an offensive line to protect the quarterback. And then, the Raiders or the Broncos just need everybody. They need wide receivers, need defensive linemen, just some positions there. And then I've got one for JJ. I bet Brock Bowers over 12.5. So everybody's got him mocked at the Jets at 10. How would you feel about that if he did not go the Jets?
I'd be very happy. Last night we did an IDP plus mock draft, a first-round mock draft, and I had my beloved Jets, and I did not take him at 10, and he was available. Now, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers seems to be running my team, so I think he might push that way. I would love Fuaga at that point, the big tackle who can slide inside to guard. We added 2 capable tackles, but they're old, and they're both going to be hurt at some point this year because they play for the Jets. So, I don't. I'm not messing with Brock Bowers at 10. It's not for me.
I just think it's a very fine line with this Jets team. They're obviously here to win now, but the offensive line can crumble. You got a quarterback who's older coming off an Achilles tear. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I just think everybody mocking Brock Bowers to Jets isn't, the thing. And then afterwards, where does he go after that? I don't think he's going to go before that. He didn't test this offseason. And Josh Norris from Underdog Football talked a little bit about testing for tight ends. We all know he's the athletic freak, but teams actually want to see the numbers because there is some correlation with the athletic testing and if they're going to hit or not. So guys like George Kittle, this athletic testing that they do, those guys hit, and it just seems like a very fine line. I'd have to pull it up and tweet it out, but it's something very interesting. And with him being injured, he didn't test at all, so teams cannot see that. They obviously see the film, and he's obviously a beast and all. But other than that, I've just got some quick long shots while we got a minute here. Until the Trey Hendrickson news, I did have Brock Bowers to Cincinnati. Of course, that ruined things at plus 900. The Rams drafting wide receiver, which would be Xavier Worthy, plus 800. And then I talked about earlier, McCarthy at 8 overall, plus 1,500. So now that completes all of my draft props. I've bet them all. So if we lose money, we're going to do it together. I plan on winning money. That's how I roll. But I just don't want to be one of those people that are throwing stuff at the wind and not backing it up. All of my money, I put my money where my mouth is. So looking forward to tomorrow. It's going to be a big night for everybody. Hopefully everybody leaves happy. I think the Giants get a wide receiver. I think who do you think is going to end up in New York?
Yeah, no, actually one of my best bets is Neighbors at pick 6 there. I personally, I like Ojunze better, but I just know the front office, and I know, like, you look at Jalen Hyatt, you look at Wando Robinson, like, they like the shifty guy. That's just kind of in their nature. And I get it for what Dable wants to do. Your offensive line still sucks. So you got to get the ball out fast. You want someone who can take a bubble 80 yards. You're not going to have 4 seconds to throw your deep cross or anything like that. So, yeah, I think they go Neighbors. And I think I'd be pretty happy because, oh, my goodness, the worst thing of this draft season was people trying to mock J.J. McCarthy to the Giants. I'm like, dude, we literally have a J.J. McCarthy at home. It's Daniel freaking Jones. We just did this a couple years ago at pick number 6. You reached for a guy who should not have been drafted where he was. He's in a terrible situation. I think, I want us to go wide receiver, rock out with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock for this season. I don't think we're set up for success this season anyway. Just start making your roster a little bit better. So, I think Neighbors I'd be happy with. And then if somehow Joe Alt fell down, I would grab Joe Alt in a heartbeat. I don't think he's going to fall. As long as we don't reach for a quarterback, I'll be okay. I'll be okay with the Dunes or Neighbors.
See, you have that same apprehension going into every draft, don't you? Like, but there's always a chance they will.
Well, the ghost of David Gettleman may come back, so I'm a little concerned.
Well, it might be hard to believe this looking at the 4 of us here, but we're not just pretty faces here at IDP Plus. We have an entire suite of tools behind us and rankings for both offense and defense, plus rookie ratings, injury trackers, snap tools, premium articles, everything. And right now you can get your first month at IDP Plus for $1 with the promo code mock draft. So head over to idpguys.org after the show to get ahead of your lazy league mates and start your march towards fantasy football greatness today with the promo code mock draft. The link and details are in the show description. Gentlemen, that was fun. It's now time for some tags where you let everybody know where they can find you and any final thoughts that you have. Doug, you may go first.
I'll make it quick. I know we're up against it here. First name, last name, as we established how boring I am and how boring JJ is. First name, last name, DOUGORTH. And starting next week, but you can start tweeting us now, JJ and I. It's at BL Outlets FF. That's all one word. Please start directing your anger and your praise toward us now so we can hit the ground running.
Very good. I can handle all the vitriol they send my way. Sebastian, you're up next.
Yeah, no. First, I want to thank you guys for having me on. It was an awesome time talking draft, and you're just talking football. And yeah, echoing that. Yeah, so on X and TikTok at the DeJean Doc. Also doing a lot of stuff for IDP Plus. So obviously, like JJ talks about, we got a lot of different great tools. So encourage you to come on. Due to sports betting, and you're like, hey, they're pushing it down our throats now because it's in 75% of the U.S. You can legally gamble in some way, right? So it's exploded the last couple of years. So if you want to know like a little bit more, I'm doing a sports betting 101 series. We're teaching you kind of the basics. What is a money line? What are your odds? Because let's be honest, the odds are stacked against us. So you got to know what you're doing before you spend your hard-earned money. And then I'm working on an NFL injuries series where I'm going through all the biggest injuries by division. I just wrapped up the AFC, so your 4 AFC divisions are done. Going to start the NFC this week. And then the last thing, United Football League. If you're itching for football right now and you want to see some professional football, encourage you to check that out. I have a UFL betting podcast. I was able to go to my first UFL game just last week. I got a media credential, so I was able to sit in the press box, have an article up on UFL.com talking about my experience there. Hopefully going to do another piece for them, a little bit more of an injury kind of behind the scenes action for that. So yeah, just IDP Plus, check me out, or X and TikTok at the DeJean Doc. But thanks again, gentlemen. It's been awesome.
It's been awesome having you. Jameson.
Over on the Twitter machine at Jameson Rules. You find me every week doing Rider Dynasty with the boys. And as for tomorrow, I'll be with a Minnesota Vikings fan who has blown up my phone for the last 2 months. He's on pins and needles, so I'll let you know if I survive tomorrow night. I'll tweet out everybody, see how that goes. But just looking forward to it, and I appreciate you guys coming on tonight. It's been a blast.
Thanks, Jameson. I'm at JJ Wenner because I'm boring on Twitter. Thank you to Doug and Sebastian. Doug, I know you forever. Sebastian, this is my first time working with you. Amazing work. Thank you so much for everything you did tonight. Thank you to Joe, who's not here, and Jameson for the work they did on the show. Thank you so much. And of course, special thank you to the whole crew at IDP Plus who helped produce the pod and put in so much work behind the scenes. As Doug said, be sure to tune in next week on Wednesday. We'll release the first episode of the All Out Blitz with Doug and myself. Then come back on Friday to check out Rider Dynasty's draft roundup. And from all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, and as always, boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.